Alright, MA Marignon, turn 79. Hopefully we have a victory message this turn. So let's just skip right down to it. Yes, it does look like everything went off. So this is the victory message. Long story short, you're probably going to end up joining another game of Dominions, is at least what I take away from the victory message. We had a lot of luck, of course, to get here. I don't want to take away from my play. I definitely think there were some good things that we did, but yeah, there were so many points that we got lucky. And I think that's normal for any Dominions game. Like, it's a lot of luck. When a game does end, you have the option to view the history. Sadly, you can't control the speed of this. You can only pause or unpause it. So we'll do kind of a lightning view of the game. This is really just to jog my own memory. The colors are the Dominion, and then the flags are like who actually controls the territory. I mean, our first piece of luck, really, that the dragon didn't jump on top of us. I think that was less likely to occur than I was worried about because, they need to use their pretender to expand. But we also almost failed expansion. It was looking pretty ugly here to the south. Like, we got closed out almost immediately, and we got really lucky that for whatever reason, nobody really expanded up here into the north. So we ended up with, kind of a weird shape, right, where we weren't really centered on our capital. And we struggled with that for a long time, right? You can see here's Vandar moving in and Micklin. So, this 2v1, I think, actually ended up, working out for us pretty well and provided some opponents that had interesting builds. But, ultimately, Marignon is fairly strong at this point in the game. And so we were really able to make, pretty good use of those wars. We were able to take out Micklin. Took a lot longer to deal with Bandar. That was definitely a situation I think I could have handled a little better. I was in the middle of having a lot of painful lessons around Blood Vengeance, so I think I was a little more cautious than I needed to be in this case. We really took our time there and sort of slowed our roll during that portion. Also, it's important to note that, while at one point we were kind of in a 3v1, right? I didn't really even mention Ashdod during all this. And, I think at some point, they managed to get their flag down in here a little bit, but we can see that, they've already disappeared under Ariu. So we were fairly lucky in that situation that, Ashdod chose to have multiple enemies at once and wasn't really able to focus on us. So that could have gone really badly. Also, two of our neighbors were involved in pretty long-running and pretty nasty wars. So, Abyssia was fighting Piangia, forever. And then Tianchi and Shiniyama were locked in conflict, right? So that kept Tianchi, really kept our southern border, pretty safe. Also, of course, Arcocephaly and Naba were fighting each other for a long time and really weakened each other. So we were able to pick up Arcocephaly more or less for free, for pretty cheap. We also got a pretty massive death basket from Arcocephaly, which is interesting because we were thinking about attacking them the whole game, which included a lot of Astral Pearls, which was really pretty transformative for us. Also, if I'm recalling correctly, Arcocephaly's capital, their site provides quite a bit of astral income, and that's actually a really big addition for Marignon. I would actually say in terms of targeting other players as Marignon, if you can grab someone who has a really good astral income, that's a big consideration. Because you have a lot of astral summons, really the Harbingers that are the ones that you want to bring in the most. And you just don't really have a lot of astral income yourself. We also dodged an earlier war with Asphodel, which I think is really important. Had we fought them at this point, I'm not sure, Ariu may have won, right? There's definitely other somewhat large contenders at this point. But instead, we were able to turn our attention to Felegra, and we were able to overrun them relatively quickly. We were also helped by the fact that, Xibalba had a sub jump in, and they did a really good job, killing off a lot of Felegra's stuff. So, we were able to push into that pretty effectively. The fact that Yis, was involved in this underwater war for so long was super important. I was pretty much all game. I mean, maybe not quite all game, but once we took Micklin and Bandar, I was pretty convinced that sooner rather than later, or certainly eventually, Yis would become our problem. But that just never materialized, maybe due to personal things in the player's life, or, they just felt that, once they finished off Pelagia, they just felt that they were too far behind and there's, no point in making a big play for the land because they were never going to be able to get the thrones that they needed. Whatever the reason, right? The fact that we did not get hit by Yis was huge. And then, I've largely missed it. The fact that, Shiniyama ended their non-aggression pact with us to attack us actually was pretty advantageous. We were able to overrun them, much more easily than we would have been able to overrun Asphodel and kind of all the forces that we'd massed to attack Asphodel. We sent most of those against Shiniyama. We were able to pick up a throne off of that, which is obviously pretty important for our victory. And then, of course, for the final wars, for the end game, we had a lot of luck in the sense that Airyu, I think, was probably one of the other strong contenders for winning the game. But the player that subbed in, I was chatting with them because they're a good person. Enjoy interacting with them. But they said that they were definitely oversubscribed. I know I felt that myself, and so I just don't think they were able to give these turns the kind of attention that would have made our victory a lot more difficult. Speaking of difficult, right, the other main advantage is one of, if not the best players in the game, was playing one of, if not the worst nations in the game. So when it comes to the middle age, Asphodel is usually not going to be one of the major late game threats. But that is, one of the major powers that we faced. So we were pretty lucky in the sense that, we had a strong player playing a weak nation rather than like some of the other really nasty nations making it to the end. It was kind of an odd endgame, actually. Like, Man is not necessarily considered, one of the strongest like middle-aged nations. Ulm is, fairly strong, but yeah, it was kind of interesting that it was largely human nations that made it to the end for whatever reason this time. There was definitely some non-human nations, but like the fact that, it was 3 human nations, and then, we were able to like quadruple team essentially because the elves come along. Asphodel, that was pretty advantageous for us. And of course, the final piece of luck is, we had 2 thrones that, didn't get forted, and, we were able to take advantage of that fact to actually close out the game. On the plus side of things, I do think that I played to Marignon's strengths, definitely. I was aware of what was important for them. They have a really strong early and mid-game flaming arrows on crossbows in an era where not everybody gets crossbows. Is pretty powerful, and Marignon's crossbows are relatively cheap and low in resource cost, so they're easy to mass. So that was really important. Also being able to take advantage of solar eclipse. I think I built the Bless pretty well. Obviously, like the shock resistance situation could have become a problem. I really was expecting that to bite us, since we had 2 air powers that were, surrounding us more or less. Not quite surrounding, but yeah, we had a lot of border with a lot of air mages. But other than that notable exception, I think the Bless was pretty solid. We did get a bit lucky in the battle against Miklin's Pretender. I think that, we were at pretty much the bare minimum of strength that we needed. But overall, I think it was a pretty good cavalry Bless and served the rest of the nation relatively well. I do think that the 30% combat speed is maybe a little questionable. It is nice because it does also help out the flagellants, but at the end of the day, since a percentage-based increase and the Knights of the Chalice just aren't that fast to begin with, even though they're cavalry, those points might be better spent elsewhere. Perhaps, a little bit of shock. I think 5 shock resistance is probably what I would do next time. And then, either invest those points in, more scales or somewhere else in the Bless. That said, I also think that the Pretender, turning the fire gems into money, we did do that a few times, and that was really nice when we were able to do that. Marignon is a very gold-hungry nation, so, if you're going to do the strategy where you're turning fire gems, into money, Marignon's probably a good place to do it. I don't really think that was, a huge factor in our victory, and I don't know if I would play, the exact same strategy again as Marignon. I probably would try a different rainbow. But I do think that the rainbow that we had was relatively well built in terms of the pathing. I was able to open a lot of doors for Marignon that normally are not available to you. And of course, moving beyond the early and the mid game, I think it did a good job of bringing in the right summons and getting our communions together. I think the turn 1 Fog Warrior communions worked really well. You can put them up relatively cheaply, right? You just need the Master Matrice, and you're not required to have the 2 Slave Matrices. You can use Witch Hunters for that. if you're willing and able to accept like, a turn 2 cast. But I do think the turn 1 cast is pretty nice, and Marignon does have some built-in Earth Astral in the form of their Grandmasters. It's somewhat rare, but you will have it available. Putting it on your Pretender is probably not a bad idea. We got fairly lucky in the sense that the first throne that we grabbed was the Crystal Throne, so we had a ton of Earth Astral available to us. But yeah, adding in that turn 1 Fog Warriors, combining it with honestly just mass protection, like Army of Gold, Army of Lead, is certainly nice, but you just don't have a ton of Earth Mages. And the few that you do have are pretty vulnerable and require a pretty massive and extremely expensive communion. Marignon is, in my opinion, only kind of a communion nation. I think if the more that you can get away from communions, really in general, but particularly with Marignon, that's going to benefit you because they're just so incredibly expensive to put together. And it's easy for communions to go wrong and burn communion slaves out. And when you're burning out like 185 gold mages, that's just extra painful. So anyway, using the slave matrices allows you instead to use things like initiates or like other mages that are a little hardier. And of course gets you, that turn 1 cast. So combining Fog Warriors with our relatively heavy armor and mass protection, layering it on top of the other stuff that we already had from the mid game was pretty effective. And we were able to roll over quite a few nations. In terms of what we didn't do that, maybe you could do as Marignon, I think more like night raiding groups, might be the way to go. It certainly would be cheaper in terms of gem expenditure. So yeah, we didn't do a great job of that. We did a lot of Witch Hunter raiding, which is fine, but it's definitely not a cheap way to do your raiding. So I think like a little more experimentation with night groups, probably not led by paladins. Paladins are just so expensive. They're definitely nice to have, and I do think like mixing them in with the Great Swords of Sharpness was a good idea, and I would do so again in the future. But kind of sacrificing them as raiders is tough. Of course, leading those with the friars is kind of equally rough. It's easy for them to get sniped. And probably the other big thing I feel like that I didn't really take great advantage of is creating armies that were completely sacred. I was still pretty worried about foul vapors and things like that because we were often mixing crossbowmen in and some of our other infantry that were not sacred. And I do think at a certain point in the game, it kind of felt like, well, we really should be trying to rely more on our bless because as Marignon, you're relying on your independent mages for a lot of that magic diversity, and you just usually don't have all that many, so it can really be a struggle, to try to cover all your forces. But since, most of the mages that you're going to be wanting to use, like your national mages, are sacred, and, you have the flagellants and the knights, you do lose the ranged component, but, again, as the game goes late, that gets less important. So I think definitely there was room to experiment with just dropping that entirely and cutting out a lot of independent mages and then just relying on kind of smaller, less like Doomstack approach, but still very dangerous armies that, were completely sacred, and that way we're able to rely on the bless for their resistances. That is a little tricky to pull off because the flagellant recruitment is a bit problematic. It's a unit that you want to mass, but you're limited by your holy points, so you need a lot of forts with a lot of temples, and you really kind of need a system in place. I really think that having a cluster of forts with temples, and then you're recruiting every turn, and you have a bunch of commanders that are ferrying them to a central point every turn, and then probably gatewaying those units out to the relevant location would have been a better system. Mine was kind of haphazard. So I definitely think there was room for improvement there and, in a few other places. But I do think that we hit, most of the notes that you're going to want to hit as Marignon, and that we navigated the diplomatic situation well enough. So let's take a look at the graphs. And yeah, looking at the province graph, this is pretty stark. That's the other thing. We definitely could have won earlier. It's just I had never really throne rushed and wasn't super familiar with exactly the timing of like magic phasing forts in and answers and things like that. But with those 2 unforted thrones, we definitely could have done that with fewer forces. Didn't really need that stealthy group sneaking out there. There was definitely a point where there was just a little bit of province defense on that Asphodel province. So really all we needed to do was save up, like 100 astral pearls and 100 earth gems, and then I don't know, like the werewolf, probably not the werewolf, but some sort of magic phase attack, like a couple castings of ghouls. They take the province, you magic phase the forts in, then you magic phase in the archangels, and then you just do the claims. So we definitely made life, a little more difficult and dragged the game out a little longer than we needed to. So that's really just like my inexperience. This, massive rise at the end here is, I think, mostly due to Shiniyama. You can see their provinces drop off at the same time. We did pick up like some territory from Eiryu. I believe that's this other line. So yeah, we were pretty far ahead. I didn't actually realize that Yis was as small as they were in comparison. But I guess, since they were splitting the water system, that does make sense. So I think, even if the throne rush had failed, this is a pretty huge advantage in provinces. Probably should have turned it into a victory sooner. Again, a lot of the reason we did have a lot of forces hanging out on the border. It's kind of one of the issues with a water nation. It's like, well, you'd strike at any time. Particularly with the mobility of the elves. I don't know, I just never really felt comfortable, leaving that border completely undefended. Looks like Man was actually the runner-up in terms of provinces by the time the game finished. I do think that they did the most work against Asphodel and had the most success. Certainly there were a lot of painful moments, but they were the ones who were actually like taking the most permanent territory off of Asphodel and like the most forts. But of course, you can see like the slow, grinding, painful progress, right, as compared to our meteoric rise when we were fighting against Shiniyama. Just highlights that, you want to be fighting people that aren't at the same tech level as you. If you can swing it, right, you don't always get to choose your wars. So yeah, I imagine forts probably not too dissimilar. Wow, actually, I think that's also, Man again. I did notice that Man was building a ton of forts, which does seem like a good strategy in the late game, to just put up as many forts as you can. That's probably something I don't really do enough. But yeah, while we can see that, Asphodel was getting pushed back, they actually ended the game with more forts than Eiryu, which is kind of surprising. So I feel like, Eiryu, again, this is probably just a fact that they were oversubscribed. Not building any forts during this time, probably unwise. And so, I would say that, this fort count probably should have been a bit higher for Eiryu, but, it does highlight that Asphodel was doing pretty well. Ulm also perhaps a little low on the fort side, although I think Ulm was a little smaller than I realized. Actually, no, they weren't that small. So, I think income is probably going to look pretty similar. With the important exception, of course, of Asphodel. Like you can really see, even before the war started, they're in a much more painful place than any of the non-pop kill nations. And while they still had a good number of forts and provinces left, as they got reduced, right, they're going to lose their most valuable lands, their most productive lands first. Because, of course, their capital and their cap circle, the areas that they've held under their control for the longest are going to have the most population killed off and are going to be the least valuable. So while they still held a decent amount of territory, their gold situation was pretty critical. Otherwise, things are somewhat as you'd expect, although interestingly, Eiryu's income and actually also Ulm's income, or no? Okay, no, this is Atlantis. Yeah, Ulm's income is probably about where I'd expect, but Eiryu's is kind of lower than I would expect. So not sure what happened there. Perhaps they just got unlucky, with the distribution of high-income provinces. Gem income, I think, is going to be relatively similar, barring the globals. Yeah, you can see a couple of the major dips that we had were when, our gem generator got dispelled. You can again see the grindy nature of this fight with Asphodel and the fact that the gem income for Man and Ulm doesn't really change all that much. You can see that, Ulm put up Earthblood Deepwell relatively early and, kept it up pretty much the whole game. Research should be interesting. Yeah, as a Fire Nation, we do have pretty good research. Lightless Lanterns, always a consideration if you're a strong Fire Nation. And I actually think some magic scales might be a consideration for a Marignon build, something I might try if I ever play them again. Our research lead was not as significant over, a couple of our opponents. I think this is Eiryu, who is researching quite well, and then, of course, Ulm, also a Fire Nation, was able to research pretty well. Interestingly, Falegra managed to get its research up there pretty high. For whatever reason, I believe this is Man. They struggled a bit. I don't want to say struggled. They still had pretty good research, but it kind of seemed like they were leaning pretty hard. They can use those monks to research, and they had a lot of monks. So yeah, I expected kind of higher research than this. Perhaps the monks, not as effective. But it's hard to say off of just one game. And less than perfect information. There could be a lot of other reasons that the research never really took off as much. And of course, Asphodel just struggling to get research done. Like that's definitely a feature of most PobKill nations. Really, again, just highlighting the skill of that player, that they were able to do so much with so little. Dominion, probably one of the less interesting graphs. I don't think anybody was, making any crazy Dominion plays or anything like that, so I don't see anything too unusual here. And army size, probably also going to be somewhat similar. That is a place, of course, Asphodel as a free spawn nation. Their army size was relatively large compared to where a lot of their other graphs were. This is a place where, I think we were able to make use of our build, kind of spending fire gems to really be able to pump our numbers up. Also benefiting from the fact that a lot of the units that we were using, especially in the late game, were sacred, so they had lower upkeep, so we were able to maintain more of them than you would for mundane troops. But otherwise, I think a lot of this army size function is just a function of the fact that we were significantly larger and a lot more money than most people. And of course, Ascension points, I do think we did a pretty good job, like grabbing 4 thrones simultaneously. Like, yeah, could have done it sooner. Wasn't perhaps like the strongest or most confident claim, but anytime you're grabbing 4 thrones at once, I do think we were able to surprise people, and that definitely made like our final victory much cleaner and much more easy. Even with this overwhelming advantage, if you add up all these graphs, right, if we ended up fighting everyone at the same time, like then this starts to become a lot more equal. And it could have taken us, quite a long time to grind out a victory conventionally, particularly if Yis had jumped in. I think if Yis chose to, continue not really to play, then we probably could have pulled out the conventional victory before the time limit. But otherwise, I think, there would have been a good chance that the game go to Cataclysm and, the game get determined by who loses thrones to Doom Horrors. So anyway, some reflections on the game. Wasn't really expecting to win a full house, perhaps ever. But yeah, pretty happy to get a win under the belt. Also kind of happy that it's with Marignon. I'm a big fan of Sacred Cavalry, so I guess it makes sense that the first victory, full house, would come with a nation that's focused on its Sacred Cavalry. And as a final note, let's take a look. I'm just kind of curious if we were able to dispel. It's not going to show us here because we're the only valid nation that's left, so everybody else's heretical magic gets scrubbed from the world. But we can take a look at the actual dispel cast. So no, the dispel failed. So it was definitely more than, well, I don't know, definitely. There is, I think, a random roll of a d20 that gets added to like each gem total. So there's definitely a strong element of randomness. But in all likelihood, this was not a minimum cast of that spell, because we did provide, probably 12 gems over the minimum cast for the dispel, probably with, maybe another 10 gems in terms of caster levels. So we had pretty good odds of dispelling it if it was a minimum cast. And so, yeah, I think this does kind of, vindicate my decision to just live with it and, not waste Astral Pearls on trying to get rid of it. Of course, the other thing, too, is that, just because you bring it down doesn't mean it's not go right back up. So still trying to figure out, what to dispel, when to dispel, whether to overwrite. I mean, Burden of Time is not really one that you can overwrite. If you want to get rid of the effect, it does not really help you if it's up because it's your cast. So I think that more or less covers it. If you've made it this far, thank you very much. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. And there'll definitely be more Dominions games in the future. And of course, I can't help myself. I love all the battles and the madness, so I'm going to take a look at this turn. It's obviously irrelevant, but, if you like battles as well, let's watch some of our mages get assassinated. Oh, this fellow. Yeah, we never did deal with him. Hey, look, there's a bodyguard here. Body Ethereal. Oh, yeah, so much Swarm. This guy is definitely dead. The bugs don't get him. The water elemental definitely will. Many witch hunters died to give us this battle. Probably about half of them from old age and disease. Yeah, and then we tried a couple water bottle assassinations. I knew this was going to be a tough stack to assassinate out of, but it's like, well, we have them here. Like, let's give it a shot. Unfortunately, both of our assassins ended up hitting this same Wraith Lord. So in fact, we know that this fails because this guy is present in the second assassination attempt. And yeah, I think a little more investment in water bottle assassins would be a good idea. Like the item that gives you the Vine Men would be pretty nice to avoid situations like this, because it is fairly easy for the water elemental to get wrapped. Also possibly like throwing a bow at the assassin as well, just as another vector that things could work out for you. You are talking about a pretty significant increase in gem expenditure, but water bottles are already pretty expensive. So it might be worth like protecting that investment. Like then again, it's like maybe it's one of those situations where it's like, well, if the water elemental is going to fail, all the extra stuff you throw at it is going to be irrelevant. And like, so we don't know if this one fails, but it's not looking good. Like, yeah, I'd say this is a fail. Yeah, he runs away. That's fair. So yeah, Wraith Lords, not really an ideal target for assassins. But, figured give it a shot. If we were able to assassinate some elves in this raiding group. Speaking of things not getting dealt with, we did move out a Witch Hunter. I think we gave him enough gems for 2 fire elementals. Hopefully we have some province defense here. So it's not impossible that this works out for us. Yeah, because I don't think Asphodel's units, they don't really like being set on fire. A little bit of danger of an HP rout. Oh boy, yeah, there goes our commander. Yeah, that's going to do the trick. So armies of Asphodel were routed. We got really lucky there because, of course, once our mage got sniped, that was lights out for our fire elementals because there's, no magic leadership left on the battlefield. So we do come away with that, but only just barely. And we lose another Witch Hunter in the process and take some province back. I think that's probably Ariu, who, we've talked before about how they're just not leaving any PD. I guess there's only so many times that you need to see a fire elemental come out as a counter raider, right? Before you're like, do I really need to have that information? Speaking of, oh no, this is not fire elemental raiding. This is just some pillar of fire raiding. Should work out because it's just one caveman. Although I don't think we blessed. Yeah, we didn't bless as part of the script, so we're not actually, we don't have Spirit Sight, and you can see the accuracy is a big problem. So I think if there'd been, basically any investment in here at all, we would have been in trouble, particularly if it wasn't a caveman province. But there wasn't. For whatever reason, the AI decided not to invest there. And then, there's a breakout attempt here on Nabab, but we moved out because, I was concerned about leaving our super combatant on there. Yeah, not sure what this is. This is, perhaps an effort just to curse us or something like that. I do think you need some gems. Yeah, now they're just retreating. So, yeah, maybe they were expecting us to jump off. That's kind of an interesting one. That player, like any good player, is difficult to predict. And speaking of difficult to predict, we get attacked by the AI. I guess it's not difficult to predict that the AI is going to attack you. It's just going to be difficult to predict exactly what they're going to use and where they're going to hit and why. Luckily, they run into our army that we were moving forward to go deal with other things, and now it's going to deal with the random garbage from the AI. So yeah, this should be no problem, and then we're going to HP route the super combatants. Yeah, the AI is not very good, and can be really annoying to play against because they just throw so much garbage at you. The single player can be fun, and it's definitely pretty nice, right? Because you can get through games and test a lot of different stuff out. Obviously, when you're playing actual games, you're talking about a couple months to finish it off. And so, it can be really difficult, to test this. You have some idea, and then it's okay, you need to wait 3 months, right, before you find out, hey, can it work? This is a slightly more interesting battle. One thing I don't know if I noted to you all, but this guy has actually been Gift of Reason, right? Been turned into a commander and given some penetration gear, which is pretty interesting for the Gaze of Death. So this is hugely expensive, and I don't know how useful it is, but it might be pretty brutal. I think in an army fight like this, because the Gaze of Death oftentimes doesn't really seem to do all that much. And I'm not even sure if we put up anti-magic for this. It's definitely something we weren't getting hit with a lot of magic resist things. And so yeah, I was getting a little on the lazy side about it. Yeah, there's no magic bonus here, so this Gaze of Death could be extremely painful if we can kill this guy quickly. There we go. I think we have Army of Lead. Yeah, so now our magic resistance is in a bit of a better place, and yeah, we were able to soul slay, so probably not worth the investment. Or maybe look into some other units that have really high hit point totals that are going to act as like soul slay sponges. But like abominations, they have like over 200 hit points. Like there's probably just not a lot of like easy, cheap units that you can use that are going to be effective decoys for those guys. And they just don't, right? It's like, you're going to use up the slots to try to increase the magic the penetration. So then that doesn't really leave you any slots to boost their magic resistance. Yeah, it was a cool attempt. I like the idea, but I'm just not sure that like it's really useful. Our knights get absolutely wrecked by the elves back here. I feel like these guys probably have some kit. Yeah, some great swords of sharpness. Ouch. So yeah, and for whatever reason, it's not dark right now. That's definitely an oversight. Kind of slapped this army together. And yeah, we don't actually have any fog warriors in this army. You can see that's making a big difference. Ariu definitely did get fog warriors off. There's a good chance actually that we lose this. Yeah, here comes some gifts from heaven, which actually might be coming from our side. It looks like we're going to come away with it, but a pretty painful victory. I don't think we're going to get the Earth King either. So yeah, definitely demonstrating that like Fog Warriors is a big deal. Yeah, losing 29 Knights of the Chalice, very painful. Okay, I was wondering why the battle ended. We managed to steal the King of Earth. So that's definitely a pretty good result. Losing the 25 Flagellants, not that big a deal. I think the Enchantress that we lost is like one of the ones that we wanted to get rid of. I'm kind of curious though, like I'm surprised that our Knights did that badly. I feel like this is actually a situation, because we brought a lot of Knights. I think this is a situation where the lack of shock resistance really messed us up, would be my guess. Because I don't think we got too badly hit by the Gaze of Death. Like, yeah, mostly like got Flagellants. Yeah, I'm not really seeing any ticks here, and obviously these Knights didn't get hit. So it's like, well, what killed these guys off? Yeah, here comes the lightning. All this lightning, yeah. So this is definitely a situation where we should not have sent our Knights like on attack rear, right into the back where like all the guys who are casting lightning are. They can't be the only ones back there. So yeah, although it looks like here they just straight up lose in melee. I mean, we have basically equal number of knights to equal number of elven commanders, and that is not going to work out in our favor. Oh yeah, and the Wraith Lord here doing really excellent work against us. So only somewhat the lightning. I was wondering if that was a situation where we were finally paying the price. Obviously, that doesn't go great for Ariu either, although, the chat that they lose, kind of irrelevant. Losing 4 of these commanders is kind of painful, but not the end of the world. The Abomination was a pretty expensive investment, and like losing the King of Earth is probably the biggest deal. Obviously, the Wraith Lords, they would have gotten back. And then we get attacked by Asphodel somewhere. Ooh, okay. Yeah, I think this is the Throne Province, right? So, like, this is what we would have had to deal with. And I'm curious to see, like, if they got the one-turn crack, but I suspect that they did. Yeah, and, like, we put a bunch of province defense in, like, just in case, because, like, why not? And it does trigger gem usage, so that's kind of nice. So, yeah, they're casting Rain, right? That's, like, stereotypically is like, oh, fire magic sucks because rain exists. I don't know, we never really experienced that. We didn't actually have a lot of opponents cast Rain against us. Obviously, Marignon has more going on than just fire magic. I mean, in terms of their magic, that's mostly what they have going on, but they also rely on, just hitting people with knights. But yeah, there's a ton here. Rigor Mortis, Howl, Leaf, Quagmire, so like combination fatigue play with a ton of chaff. Like, yeah, this would have been a really painful army to deal with. This is something, one thing that we also didn't really jump into as Marignon is I think we could have made better use of Firestorm. Maybe summoning in some Terracotta Soldiers, or honestly even just using groups of our Paladins, like with their high fire resistance off the Bless, combined with their heavy armor. They're going to be pretty immune to Firestorm, and so like, yeah, we really was like, make things dark, and then put up Firestorm, and then, yeah, fight our knights like that. So that's probably something that I should have mixed in more, and really would have helped us in situations like this. Asphodel's no fool, right? So they did manage to get fire resistance up on a lot of their units. Yeah, the ones that got summoned in later didn't get it. But their main army would have had fire resistance and a good amount of protection, so, that wouldn't have been the end-all be-all, but it would have helped tilt things in our favor. Luckily, we never had to fight that army. Speaking of armies that we never had to fight, I feel like this might be, yeah, very happy that we never had to deal with this. I do think this was moving in our direction. This is just clearing out some barbarians, but yeah. This would have been pretty painful. There's a lot of nasty sacreds here, all the mind blasters, a lot of nasty casters. These statues would have been a real problem. The bless is kind of interesting for the statues. I feel like it's not really doing them that much of a favor. But yeah, I certainly don't know Middle Age Agartha at all. But 22 protection, 35 hit points. They don't have great stats, but they probably also don't care about the dark. Yeah, they have Spirit Sight. So anyway, very glad that we didn't have to deal with that army. And then yeah, this is just the AI doing AI stuff, no doubt. Yeah, some random summons, some random troops. They run into this army. Yeah, forget about that AI. That is not going to work out for them. And they do bleed out a few Golem Crafters, which is kind of interesting. It seemed like some of the Soul Vortexes were a little bit too close to units and mages. Yeah, that can be a hard thing to juggle, especially with an army this large, because if things overlap, and it's not always clear from the army setup screen, when things are going to overlap, they end up pushing units around. So, sometimes it looks like you're clear, and then some stuff gets around and nope, you're not clear. People are hanging out inside of a soul vortex. These are these lizards. I really wanted vengeance against them. We'll see. We gave this guy some better bodyguards and, quite a few gems. So yeah, this should work out for us. But yeah, those lizards dealt with a lot of our raiders. And really, in a lot of ways, that's just, another plug for elite warriors. Imagine if those guys actually had some armor. You pretty much have elite warriors at that point. So there's a reason that a lot of Satis players, when they have it available, use that quite a bit. Yeah, it's just another one of our random raids against very minimal province defense. That's probably going to work out. Wait, no, that was the lizards. Yeah, that one does work out for us. So, more standard raiding. Speaking of standard rating, I bet you that this is a thug with a Vine Shield and a Frostbrand. Yep. Does he run into anything? He does not, though sadly it's a lot of province defense. But that is not going to help us. Yep, Vine Shield trumps basically infinite PD. Not quite. It definitely does depend a bit on the province defense type, but it's not a good way to try to deal with that. And then yeah, Phlegra, AI Phlegra doing a little bit of patrolling with Mouflon with very little support, because sure, why not? We're sending in one of our armies. It's a little on the reduced side, but I think it's going to be more than enough to deal with this randomness. Probably should have, I don't know, it's hard to say. I mean, again, part of the reason that we weren't jumping on Phlegra is it wasn't controlled by the AI for a long time, and we were planning on throne rushing there, and we kind of wanted to leave it as a buffer between us and Asphodel, but I think we could have taken it earlier. I think, yeah, I did need to be as afraid of all this garbage as I was. Though again, I do think that the white mages would have been a lot more dangerous in the player's hands. And we definitely have struggled with combatants at times in various playthroughs, this one included. Though we probably had, enough with the Soul Slate components that we would have been okay. But we were a little light in terms of knights with great swords of sharpness. And then yeah, here we are just raiding forward with some knights. Probably should have put together more knight raiding groups, although that said, it is really painful, because raiding is dangerous. You lose a lot of raiding groups, and each knight actually costs 5 gold more than an initiate. So each of these guys is basically a mage, a very cheap mage, but a mage. So, risking them in raiding can be kind of painful. You need to pick and choose where you raid. This is definitely got to be one of your heavier raiding groups. At least in my opinion. So yeah, that one worked out for us. And then we get attacked by an elf, no doubt, in our territory. Just can't be rid of these guys. Probably should be doing more mind hunting, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. Magic resistance 17. It's not great. Ooh, this is actually one of our blood hunting operations. Yeah, and we definitely did not script this at all. Yeah, resist cold. Come on, imps. Not that I really think imps would bail us out of this situation. So yeah, this definitely would be unfortunate. Yeah, we're just kind of lucky that Eru didn't happen to find our blood hunting operation sooner than they did. Yeah, I don't think this. Well, there's the imps, but yeah, I don't think this is gonna work out for us. I do think eventually, you never know, we might get lucky. But probably that's going to be the end of our blood hunting operation. Yeah, our garnets do at least escape. They probably retreat successfully, but trying to get all this patrol chaff back together would have been a real hassle. We weren't really relying too much on our blood hunting intentionally. I should have leaned into that more, and I kind of knew that, but again, like the plan was to get a bunch of gold, and blood hunting and gold kind of each other. If you're doing a lot of blood hunting, you're getting a lot less gold. So the garnets were a really lucky find, and certainly in the future in other games I would lean more heavily into that. I don't love blood magic, although I am playing Blood Nation currently. So it's a part of the game. It's a really effective late game strategy. And, if you want to play at the highest levels, like, you can't afford to ignore that if that's something you can pick up. So the AI doing AI stuff with the Bronze Colossus, that works out for them. We lose a province to them, but never too worried about the AI. Unless they're quite large. If the AI is extremely large, then it's like you're going to be seeing a lot of stuff from them, and you can just get flooded, right? It's like, yeah, you can beat all their armies, individually, but it's like, can you beat all their armies everywhere all at once every turn? Sometimes the answer is no. So anyway, this is one of our armies, the one that we've been marching through all the Wells of Pestilence, and this is the neighboring province. So we were planning on like magic phasing a fort in here, and then gatewaying a bunch of reinforcements in if our throne rush failed. So obviously that battle's going to work out for us. We do manage to lose some flagellants, but that's kind of life. Catch a bit more action in the Ulm Asphodel conflict. It's just kind of a small raiding group, though it does have a caster here with them. Maybe Creeping Doom. Yeah, there's like one of them suicide squads, just a few All Mights. I don't think this is going to work out for them. They don't love poison damage. Yeah, because it's armor negating those bug attacks, and Ulm doesn't have any poison resistance. Also, like, Ulm has fatigue issues because they have such heavy armor. So in a lot of ways, like, these Ulmish infantry are kind of the wrong answer for fighting against these mannequins. I'm not really sure what the right answer would be. They are magic beings, so I think maybe making more use of like the Black Priests, who can cast like Iron Blizzard and Iron Darts, which deal a ton of damage in general, but if I'm recalling correctly, they deal bonus damage to magic beings. I think that would clear out Asphodel's chaff quite quickly. I have no idea what this is. Is this our guy? This is our guy. What is he doing here? I don't know what this is. This is a misclick, I think. So yeah, that's, whoops, this is the wrong battle. Yeah, this one down here, yeah, that doesn't work out for him. Maybe he's diseased and we're trying to get rid of him. Yeah, who knows? Definitely was pretty sure we were going to win, but, not 100%. So, and I mean, even when you're putting in maximum effort, it's pretty easy to make a misclick here or there when you're doing like this much scripting. And then, yeah, we were just using this guy to, this is our super combatant, raiding deeper into the territory. Like I said, I was a little bit worried about just leaving him sat there on Nabah. I felt like probably there was an answer moving in, so better to keep him on the move. You should be able to take out this province defense pretty easily. Yep, so happy to see. Kind of interesting that there were no kills. Not sure what happened there. But regardless, we do come away with it. Perhaps they have fear. This is definitely unexpected. So Shiniyama must have like some Bakemono, I'm guessing. Oh no, it's their pretender coming back. So they managed to recall their pretenders somehow. They probably still have a few mages left, like in a few of their forts. And when you recall your pretender from after they were killed, they always appear on your capital. And if you don't control your capital, then it triggers a battle with the province defense and anyone that's patrolling. We do have a guy patrolling, with fire elementals, like most of our important forts just kind of have this as a matter of course. Fire elementals not a great answer, to monoliths, so I think there's a pretty good chance that we lose this. Yeah, this monolith, has a ton of hit points. That said, it's never going to be able to like crack and storm the fort, but this would have been kind of annoying. So that's pretty hilarious. Let's see. Okay, we do manage to eventually grind it down and kill it. But another reason that we would have wanted to actually eliminate Shiniyama completely to avoid situations like that. Speaking of eliminating Shiniyama completely, man doing a little bit of raiding. I think Shiniyama's last like free province. Not a lot of PD here. Again, I don't think they have any money. Pretty standard, just like mundane raiding group from man. Not that there's anything wrong with that. So yeah, they're able to take it almost for free. Nicely done. Then we get attacked by Agartha. This is probably, oh no, this is kind of near the throne, so it looks like Agartha was making some efforts to make our life difficult, perhaps, in terms of the throne rush. We don't really have any defense here. This looks like a super combatant. Yeah, kind of a nasty one. You know, he's got the fear helmet, he's got 36 protection, 135 hit points. Yeah, this guy would be kind of a pain, somewhat low magic resistance, so Soul Slay probably would have been the answer. But luckily we didn't have to figure that one out. So let's see. Yeah, we were just hitting some random OAK. Yeah, I'm kind of actually interested to see. These dire wolves have surprised me before. I felt like, yeah, there's no way that the Bakemono lose to this, but you know, Bakemono, yeah, they attrit out. They don't have great morale, so it does work out for us. But yeah. Like I said, those direwolves have definitely surprised me before in other contexts, but in this case, we take them out pretty easily, you know, which certainly was my expectation when I issued that attack, right? This is our Wraithlord friend, cleaning out some province defense, Soul Vortex. I think we're pretty much safe now. I think that was Wolf Tribe. Yeah, Wolf Tribe can be kind of dangerous, but against a Wraithlord, not so much so. And then we had a couple other raids. We also captured, we assaulted Urmor anyway. Yeah, this was a bit questionable. Yeah, we had there's like an enslaved mind. Yeah, we actually run into a serious force. Yeah, this was definitely a mistake on my part. Because there's no magic resistance gear on any of these guys. And like combining them up like this, not wise. So like, yeah, and this is just like Horde of Skeleton raiding. It's like one of those situations where it's like, well, like one of these guys alone would probably be able to beat relatively minimum PD. So like adding a couple others isn't really like providing us any additional benefit, right? Because if we do run into something really serious, a couple extra guys spamming out, you know, Horde of Skeletons isn't really going to change the balance. So yeah, that was less than inspired on my part, and you know, we suffer for it. Thankfully, they just get killed rather than having their minds enslaved. So we dodge a bullet there, but yeah, that's not my best work. And then, you know, we're attacking the AI somewhere. Yeah, it's just recapturing. This is the trail of destruction that their pretender is leaving. You know, you're thinking maybe the pretender would hang out, but this is the AI that we're talking about. The AI likes to attack. This guy's not really kitted out for dealing with province defense, but he should be able to deal with little minimum amounts like that. And then we're assaulting Urmor. So this is just kind of one of our regular armies, not a whole lot to it. And there's, yeah, kind of a normal defense here that we've been seeing from Shiniyama. They've summoned in, these actually are not direwolves. They are relatively similar, but they are Okamis. I think the main difference is they are more powerful in magic scales. They're also pretty effective bodyguards, but otherwise a little underwhelming, like, you know, not great attack density. Like their protection is kind of difficult to buff because they have decent natural protection, but, you know, they wear no armor. We probably are going to take some casualties from the wall archers. I will say that Shiniyama gets some of the best wall archers, I feel like, in the game, at least like that I've seen. Like, yeah, they're pretty nasty, but yeah, we have enough investment here. Shiniyama's down to it. So we were probably able to take that without, yeah, almost no losses, but it's not a fair contest. And of course, we're very glad that, you know, among the killed was not one of our holy threes. You know, we do lose 30 killed, so like that could have happened. Like, here's a commander that got killed. I was perhaps a little too flippant about this. You know, I mean, like, there's so much attrition in the late game that I do think that generally you don't have to worry about this too much unless you're pressing really strongly into the person's dominion who has it up. But it is extremely annoying, and like, yeah, I think a lot of times it's not a good thing to cast because it kind of pisses off everyone in the world since it just strikes randomly. But again, you know, Asphodel, like, pretty much all their neighbors were attacking them already, so it's like, well, there's kind of no downside at that point. Quite a few unexpected events that result in attacks. Yeah, group of knights, fantastic. Barbarian horde, sure, why not? Yellow mold, a classic. Hey, we do at least find some nature gems, that's nice. Yeah, we ban some free thinkers. We're not about that here in Marignon. And yeah, we probably lose some provinces. Yeah, it's definitely looking like a province loss to these barbarians. Classic. Yeah, they don't even take that many losses. And like knights, I think those knights. Yeah, I don't know why they're trying to take over a cave. That's a little weird. This is a lot of knights, actually. So yeah, ooh, they run into, like, yeah, some of our counter raiders. So maybe we have a chance. We're going to make some fire elementals. Okay, we might actually come away with this. It's a lot of knights. We do have some bodyguards at least. We have a rout. looks like it works out for us. So, that's the advantage of getting raided by a bunch of elves. You also deal with your misfortune scales promptly, at least in some cases. So, we do lose a little bit. We have some retreats, but overall it works out. We patrol out sneaking independent, which is kind of interesting. Yes, false prophets. Always happy to get rid of these guys. I think we're actually going to watch this guy die. I really hate these guys so much. Although I will say, I think monster boars are actually worse. Monster boars are a real hassle. Oh, he's going to get away. This is why they are always appearing. That was extremely unsatisfying. We do patrol out some scouts, which mostly doesn't matter. We're, starting to break down Phlegra. Asphodel does get that 1-turn crack on the throne fortifications, so it was extremely important that this throne claim went off. Had this gone on another turn, we do have a lab there now, so we would have been able to gateway in a lot of reinforcements, but that was a pretty scary army to be fighting. I'm not at all confident that we would have been able to hold that. Probably should have forged more gateway gear so that we could have gatewayed in multiple groups. So that's definitely a consideration, for next time if we end up ever having to throne rush again, which is not an uncommon way to win. This is kind of sad. I think this was one of our guys, that could cast Breath of the Desert, and it was kind of a rarity. I didn't even realize he was diseased. I might have picked up a disease and died all in the same turn. Burden of time is definitely a problem for us. And then sadly, Pelagia was eliminated, right as we won. And so I think that covers this irrelevant turn.